Hi everybody, welcome to Langer at the Mic. I'm Mike Langer. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here and the Montreal Canadiens are not in them, I know. But I want to share a random thought that I had this weekend. Brendan Gallagher in his exit interview said that he broke his ankle blocking a shot earlier in the season and came back to play through it for an entire month. First of all, what the was the point of that? But second of all, that got me thinking of the Montreal Canadiens injury situation as a whole, as the Habs set the record for most man games lost with over 700 last year, and the Habs, they had another 751 man games lost this year. I want to preface this by saying that the injuries that the Habs suffered on a micro scale are almost entirely based on unfortunate circumstance and are of no fault to the players or the medical staff. Josh Anderson getting pushed into the Lightning goal while trying to score an empty netter, bad luck. Caden Gooley accidentally getting pushed into the boards and going knee first into the boards, bad luck. Brendan Gallagher breaking his ankle blocking a shot, bad luck. You could also go way back to Carey Price's knee getting run into by Chris Kreider, bad luck. I also want to say that while there is now some evidence of the medical staff being at fault, i.e. letting Gallagher play with a broken ankle, I am a kinesiology major, but I am not a doctor, nor do I have any inside information on how the Habs medical staff operates. Therefore, this is an entirely speculative opinion that I'm about to share with you. On a big picture level, I wonder if the Montreal Canadiens' historically dire injury situation is a byproduct of Marc Bergevin's team building and by virtue of simply being a bottom 5 team in back-to-back seasons. When you're a bad team that doesn't have anything to play for, you're less incentivized to rush injured players back into the lineup. That also means it will take less drastic of an injury to remove players from the lineup in the first place, especially if they're young rookies that you're trying to develop. And the Habs, well, they had 14 rookies suit up for them this season, second to only Columbus's 18. You want to give young players the best chance to succeed. Well, you want to give all players the best chance to succeed, but especially young players. And it's a lot tougher for young players to develop confidence and success if they have to play through injury. But now I want to take this a step further. Is the Habs injury situation a lingering after effect of how Marc Bergevin built the team? As time goes by, I think we're seeing more and more of how bad of a team builder Marc Bergevin was. I still think he was a terrific leader in his time as GM of the Montreal Canadiens. He cared for his players, he wanted the best for them, and he also built rosters that made the playoffs in 6 out of 10 seasons, including, of course, trips to the conference final and Stanley Cup final. Although 3 of those 6 playoff appearances were the lockout year, the bubble, and the COVID-shortened 2021 season, but I digress. Either way, it has become incredibly clear that those rosters were never built to be sustainable contending teams in today's NHL. Bergevin overly invested in safe, high-character, defensively responsible players, and for Carey Price to bail out their deficiencies. Bergevin traded PK Subban for Shea Weber. He gave $23 million to Carl Alzner, $39 million to Brendan Gallagher, over $13 million to both Yoel Armia and Paul Byron. Bergevin hired old-school defensive-minded coaches in Michel Therrien, Claude Julien, and Dominique Ducharme. He allowed for players like Arturi Lehkonen and Jake Evans to develop over guys like Galchenyuk, Kotkaniemi, Sherbak, McCarron, etc., etc., etc. Overall, Marc Bergevin had little grasp on how to scout, acquire, and develop skilled players. The Drouin trade is another example of that. For all those reasons, Marc Bergevin had no choice but to give a max contract to Carey Price. And at that point, it was a matter of hoping and praying that the right roster combination would be good enough to make the playoffs and that Carey Price could channel his inner Hall of Fame self to backstop them to a Stanley Cup, kind of like he almost did in 2021. Bottom line, great goaltending, conservative defense, and opportunistic goal scoring could win you a playoff series or 2, but the chances of winning an actual Stanley Cup with that philosophy are pretty much the same likelihood that the Habs had of making it to the Cup final in 2021 in the first place, and then beating a stacked Tampa Bay Lightning team. So, in other words, not very likely. So how does this all relate to injuries? When you have an entire roster of character, safe, defensive-minded guys and a goaltender that's expected to play 70 games a season, that could easily wear you down in today's NHL. It means you have to play more without the puck, block more shots, give and take more hits, and your goaltender has to stop more high-danger scoring chances over a 70-game workload and a 4-round playoff run to win a Stanley Cup. Now, don't get me wrong, you obviously need your entire roster to be willing to lay it all on the line, block shots, finish hits, and your goaltender has to stop high-danger scoring chances, but you can't have all 12 forwards and 6 defensemen be of that defensive mindset, causing you to depend that much more on your goaltender. because you'd be missing the skilled players who know how to work hard and work smart. Those players on your top lines and D pairings that can be play drivers, those that create opportunities for goals instead of waiting for those opportunities to be given up by the other team. Then at the other end, you need those skilled players that can actively take away chances for the other team through takeaways instead of passively through blocked shots. Now, I will be honest, the stats don't exactly back up my claim of the Habs being a shot-blocking, low-possession team over the last decade. The Habs finished top 10 in block shots in only 5 of the last 11 seasons and top 5 in block shots in only 4 of the last 11 seasons. The puck possession metrics don't support me either. In terms of Corsi, which is the percentage of all shot attempts in a given game, the Habs finished top 10 actually in terms of Corsi percentage in 6 of the last 11 seasons, while finishing bottom 10 in Corsi in only 3 of the last 11 seasons. Then in terms of Fenwick, which is the percentage of unblocked shot attempts in a given game, the Habs were top 10 in 6 of the last 11 seasons while finishing bottom 10 in only 4 of the last 11 seasons. And that makes sense because the Montreal Canadiens have had several seasons under Marc Bergevin where they were actually a pretty good puck possession team, like in 2016-2017 where they had Alexander Radulov in the last year of Andrei Markov, but they just could not score, and that was their undoing in that Rangers series. So again, while the stats over the last decade don't exactly back me up, they surely do for this season, where the Habs were top 5 in block shots and bottom 5 in both Corsi and Fenwick. They were also number 1 in high danger chances given up. That plus the culmination of players from the Bergevin era that were starting to age, well, that paints a bit more of a clearer picture in terms of the Habs injury situation for these last 2 years. Carey Price, Shea Weber, Paul Byron, they don't count towards man games lost because they were on LTIR, but Jonathan Drouin, Brendan Gallagher, Jake Evans, they surely do. Then you look at Caden Gooley and David Savard, who had to play heavy minutes where they had to block a lot of those shots and take and give a lot of hits. Gooley just turned 21 years old in January, and he's still learning how to handle big minutes at the NHL level. David Savard, on the other hand, he's in his 30s and not exactly meant to play big minutes at this stage of his NHL career. Brendan Gallagher and Jake Evans, with the way they play, they're definitely prone to injury, so enough said there. Cole Caulfield, an undersized player, he suffered his first major injury as an NHLer. Josh Anderson played a full 82 games just once in his entire career. Kirby Dach had an injury-riddled 2021 season 2 years ago and another one this year. That's something to look out for, even though he took a huge step forward this year. Arbor Xhekaj fights, of course, and plays a very physical style. Hopefully, he could find some kind of balance in his play so that he doesn't wear down. And of course, Juraj Slafkovsky, at just 18 years old, playing in his first NHL season, we saw on numerous occasions that he does not know how to properly take a hit, as he got blindsided several times this year. So in my opinion, despite the flashes that Slafkovsky showed, it was only a matter of time before he was going to suffer a significant injury in his rookie season. In conclusion, I want to remind you that this video is entirely speculation based, and on a micro level, the number one reason why players get injured is unfortunate circumstance, which is of no fault to the medical staff. But from a big picture standpoint, I think the Habs being a bottom 5 team in back-to-back seasons is the number one reason for the amount of games that regular roster players had to miss. If they were in a playoff race or if there was something to play for, injured players would have been rushed back a little bit quicker in my opinion. But then the combination of aging Bergevin players that always worked hard but not always smart, I'm talking about Gallagher, Evans, Anderson, and Savard, along with players that are historically injury prone like Sean Monahan, Jonathan Drouin, and perhaps Kirby Dach, as well as young players that are learning to not only play in the NHL but succeed and stay healthy in the NHL, Gooley, Harris, Xhekaj, Caulfield, and Slafkovsky. And finally, maybe, just maybe, a medical staff that should have done a better job at preventing injuries from becoming more serious. But again, we have no evidence of that other than them letting Gallagher play through a broken ankle. I think a perfect storm of all of those factors are what led to the Montreal Canadiens setting the record for most man games lost in back-to-back seasons. The good news is, I think all of those factors will become less and less apparent as the Habs progress through their rebuild. Bergevin-era players will be either moved or allowed to walk, and the young players will gain more experience and learn how to manage themselves so that they can play at a high level while staying healthy. And lastly, again, maybe, just maybe, reinforcements will be made to the medical staff. But that's all for this video. Now I want to hear from you, of course. How concerned are you about the Habs injury situation from the last 2 years and moving forward? Let me know in the comments section. I also want to say that as of the recording of this video, I am 2 away from 400 subscribers, so thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. I also have some really cool ideas coming up, so your continued support will help me achieve those and provide better content for you in return. So again, be sure to hit like, hit subscribe, give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Mike Langer for both. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time.